What's going on, everybody? Welcome to week 15. Pretty crazy week. A week full of injuries and COVID news that honestly makes it extremely difficult to break down the weekend. Tonight, we still have some issues as far as injuries and COVID news goes. But this weekend, I know I'm going to get a lot of start sit questions. And frankly, the answer for a lot of them will be I don't know yet. And we'll just have to track the news. But welcome on in to the Thursday Night Football FanDuel Fantasy Q&A. I'm your host, Brandon Gdula. I'm the managing editor at numberfire.com. You can find all of my content over at Numberfire. And specifically for tonight, I took on the single game preview. So I have some detailed notes, some simulations are up there in that article, talking about some trends that I'll go over here as well, but it's a good reference for tonight. And then for the weekend, I have a start sit column. And if this is anybody's first time, talk about this often, but my start sit column looks at basically every relevant fantasy football asset and goes through the odds that they finish at a certain threshold. That's for quarterbacks and tight ends. It's top 12 weeks. Their odds to be a top 12 performer. For running backs and receivers, it's top 24. Now, a lot of that is going to change based on the news that we've gotten. I'll need to make updates to that. I'll do my best to keep that as updated as I can. But again, I know I'm going to get start sit questions, even though we're focused on the single game slate for Thursday night. I'm going to try to keep that updated. I'll tell you to go there. Check that out as I can update stuff. Check out the player news section on Numberfire. Have the FanDuel Scout app to get push notifications sent to you. It's just one of those weeks. There's not a whole lot we can do. I mean, we can kind of try to read the tea leaves, but for the most part, this week is going to come down to being really proactive to the news. So I think that kind of covers the editorializing that I feel like I need to contextualize how this next half an hour is going to go, because again, I'm going to do my best. I can run some stuff through the simulations, but we find out a player's ruled out. Obviously, that doesn't really, that's going to change things, right? So I'm going to do my best. So just bear with me. The COVID list is long. The injury list is long. And it's just one of those weeks where there's no way around it. So get those questions in. I see a whole bunch of questions coming in already. You can hit up the chat on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch for questions pertaining to tonight's single game slate. This weekend as well, I'm focusing primarily on the Thursday night slate. And as always, I will start there and then branch out and see where the questions take us. So get those questions in. I see a bunch rolling in, but I'm going to start as always, kind of get the base level stuff out of the way, look at the game from a top-down perspective for tonight. We get the Chiefs, the Chargers. It's a second time around divisional matchup. They played early in the year. The over-under here, 54. The spread is 3 in favor of the Chiefs on the road. Going to be a high-scoring game. Should be a high-scoring game based on that total. Should be a close game based on that spread. Of course, crazy things happen, but honestly, it's shaping up to be both of those. I think high scoring, back and forth, tons of fantasy points, and that's going to determine the way that we build our lineups for tonight. I'll jump over to my spreadsheet here, look at some matchup stuff. The pass defense is overall pretty middling, so we don't have to avoid either pass defense. We don't have to feel like we need to target either pass defense with the quarterbacks. Of course, the quarterbacks, both Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert, have really high salaries. You can roster them both together, but it's really restrictive with what else you can do in your lineup. So talk about that if we have questions there. The rushing matchups, much better. Both teams just bottom tier in terms of rushing success rate allowed to running backs. The Chargers give up a ton of expected points on the ground. Tons of adjusted fantasy points per carry allowed on the ground. Just it's the way that they built their defense. The less you run on them with the attempt to limit the pass, which primarily comes against receivers. They're second in adjusted FanDuel points per target. So what this number does is it actually adjusts on a player level basis. I go through, and we know that targets again from Tyreek Hill are different from targets thrown to Byron Pringle. Not trying to throw Byron Pringle on the bus, but it adjusts on a player level basis, and with that, the Chargers have been really good against receivers, but weak against tight ends, and I think that's relevant for tonight with Travis Kelce. And then the final thing I like to do from just that sort of game level preview is look at the pace and pass rate of each team. Both teams play pretty quickly. Both are top 12 in pace, according to the data that I use, which looks at each side's pre-snap win probability. Whenever it's between 20 and 80%, kind of weeds out that garbage time number. Both teams like to play pretty fast, run a lot of plays, and they're both pass heavy, both ranking top 8 in the NFL in pass rate. Now, high total, tight spread. What does that typically mean for a single game slate? Single game optimals, what do they look like? I pulled since 2019 games that fit, this type of mold, total of over 50, spread between 1 and 5 points. So that tight spread there. What happens? What's most likely to happen? Quarterback's still the most likely by far position to finish as the MVP. Makes sense. There's enough points to go around for quarterbacks to rack up multiple touchdowns passing, which is what quarterbacks typically need for a really huge game from a FanDuel standpoint. Running backs drop by about 9 percentage points here in terms of their odds of finishing as the optimal MVP. I think we can feel pretty good with this number here tonight, simply because Austin Eckler is expected to play, but have his workload limited. The Chiefs employed a 3-man committee last week, although I think there are reasons to like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Not really any of those guys shaping up to be great MVP picks as primary plays. I'm not going to talk anybody out of playing Austin Eckler as the MVP, but again, reports are that he will be limited. Tight ends, just always a low probability. It's a little bit different with Travis Kelce, but even whenever he's in these single game slates, doesn't really finish as the MVP very often. And then for wide receiver, we see about a 5 percentage point boost. 2 receivers being the optimal MVP. Again, makes sense. Enough points, enough touchdowns to go around for receivers to overtake running backs and be better plays than the full sample of single game slates. One thing that's really interesting is that the favorite and the underdog have come up with, I think it's sample 76 games. Yeah. The same amount of MVPs in optimal lineups. That's down from 59% usually for favorites. It's half and half here. And the one number that really jumps out to me is that underdog quarterbacks are the best sort of play in comparable games to what we have tonight. That is really appealing for Justin Herbert. Just going to leave that out there. Kickers, I always like to talk kickers. A little bit less likely than average to finish in the optimal lineup. Still about over out of 10 finish as or finish inside the optimal lineup. Let me turn off my Wi-Fi here. I think I'm lagging a little bit. And then whenever the underdog does come, or whenever the MVP does come from an underdog side, it is very, very heavily, very often that quarterback. So I think Justin Herbert makes for a really standout play tonight from an MVP standpoint. I'll pull up the simulation results. These are based on number fires projections. I simulated out the slate 10,000 times to see how likely players are to finish inside the top 5 with the most FanDuel points. Pull up some touchdown props because really touchdowns drive a lot of scoring in all games, but on a single game slate, touchdown odds are something that we should really consider. So, love this game. The pace, the pass rate, the over-under should be a lot of points. I think the best play at MVP is Justin Herbert. I think I'm going to be a little bit light on Austin Eckler because of the reports that his workload will be limited. And with that, I will dig into questions. All right, starting at the top here. Grimfan on YouTube's asking, who do we use for Lockett's replacement? And will Thielen play Monday? Okay, so for Tyler Lockett's replacement, I don't think there's going to be a one-to-one replacement for Lockett with him on the COVID list. If we're looking for a big beneficiary, honestly, it's probably DK Metcalf because DK Metcalf's volume has really been down while the team is just focused on Tyler Lockett. I think the secondary beneficiary is Gerald Everett, who I talk about quite often on the NFL Heat Check podcast I do with Jim Sonis, previewing the main slate, the full slate of FanDuel games. I think he's in a good spot to be a safe volume bet for this week. If we're looking for, outside of those guys, who gets a boost, probably going to be D. Eskridge. He's been playing more and more snaps. As a rookie, came on slow. I would say that he's the guy with the best chance of, really overperforming because Tyler Lockett's out. I do think that it's still good for DK Metcalf from a volume standpoint, but one thing always to keep in mind is that efficiency bumps down whenever you take good players off the field. That's something that we should be a little bit worried about with the Seahawks offense, especially with, frankly, Tyler Lockett being the driver for a lot of that efficiency. Then as for Thielen, they play Monday. This would have been the first day of the week that Minnesota had a practice report. From what I'm seeing, Thielen did not practice, and it doesn't really sound like there's any indication that he's going to play Monday. That's the best I can do. Reading those tea leaves, doing my best. Doesn't sound like he'll play, so probably another big role for KJ Osborne. Another question from Grimfan: how does Metcalf's value? How is Metcalf's value affected by Lockett being out? Again, we should see better volume for DK Metcalf, which really hasn't been there. But I would honestly anticipate a decrease in offensive efficiency with Tyler Lockett off the field. That leads to fewer red zone chances, fewer touchdown chances for DK Metcalf. So for him specifically, it might honestly work out to a wash where he needs more volume anyway than he's been getting. And he's good enough to generate touchdown chances himself. So I would say it's not really a huge bump, but for the other guys, like even like a D. Eskridge, Rashad Penny, I think it's a downgrade for this offense pretty easily. Question for tonight. Grim fans asking value for Hardman. Would you play a kicker? Does Kelsey finally break out of his touchdown drought? Okay, a lot of questions here. I will start from the first question here. I made a note in my Thursday Night Helper on, again, Number Fire. Mecole Hardman's role has just been getting worse. He's not really their number 3. That's now Byron Pringle. That's been the case in 2 post-bye games. Pringle, let me see here, 72% route rate in 2 post-bye games. Demarcus Robinson, 58%. Josh Gordon was at 32%, but he's on the COVID list. I think he's technically not really out yet, but he almost literally can't play. It'd kind of be a miracle, but even he is over Mecole Hardman, who's run 28% of the routes. So I don't really like Mecole this for tonight. I would rather go with Byron Pringle. I'm kind of just down on Hardman running as that'd be the 5th receiver behind even just Pringle and Robinson, as well as Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. You play a kicker tonight again. That's really not what we see. It's not more likely. It's not terrible. These aren't terrible odds. If you want to go double quarterback, if you do that, I think you're at like 8,800 left for your, on average. I mean, it's doable. I'm not really into the kickers tonight that much just because there are enough producers. I'm much more likely to go with a 1 quarterback play and assume that, Tyreek, Kelce, Keenan, Mike Williams, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, these guys have enough points where you can't really miss out on them just to get to both quarterbacks and then drop it down for 7-8 points from a kicker. Not really how I'm going to play it, but if it makes a perfect lineup work for you, I'm not against it. And then for Kelce, I made another note in my primer on Number Fire. His red zone role has been really weird. He's at a 15% red zone share and a 6% end zone target share. Tyreek Hill, by contrast, is at 26% and 35% respectively. I don't know what it is. I tweeted about this a few weeks ago, one of my few tweets in the season, but they're not throwing the ball to Travis Kelce in the end zone. It's straight up regression says that he'll score soon. The usage has been really worrisome, so I don't want to just say, look at Travis Kelce in his game log. He's going to score eventually. Like he's going to. We know that he's good enough, but the usage is really, really strange. So I'm not necessarily looking at like this is a must situation for Travis Kelce. That being said, again, it's a much better tight end matchup against the Chargers than it is for receivers. So I like Kelce tonight. I'm just not saying he's like a lock for a touchdown due to regression because the usage of the red zone role has been really, really, really strange for a player of his caliber. Chris is saying Vikings Bears -3.5. What do you think? That's not a game I've really dug into, but for me, I'm going to go the Vikings there. I don't really like what the Bears have going on. Justin Fields still not quite where I want him to be. Again, that's a Monday night game, so I'm not quite that far ahead. But yeah, I would lean Vikings there of the two. DJ's asking Mecole Hardman or Jared Cook on Facebook. Yeah, so that's again goes back to just the role for Mecole Hardman getting worse. The role for Jared Cook with Keenan Allen coming back, it's going to go down, but his role's been like justifiable. So for me, it's going to be Jared Cook pretty easily between the two. And I feel honestly pretty good about that. His red zone role has been fine. With Keenan Allen back on the field, it's going to help the offense move the ball better. So I'm going to go Jared Cook there between those two. Evan on YouTube is asking start 3 Eckler, CEH, Mitchell, Monty, Jacobs. Thank you for the question. That's a really good one. I'll pull up my start sit simulations here. I'll leave Eckler there because he's already in this. So my assumption here is that these are all powered by Number Fire's projections. I'm gonna assume that Eckler is in here despite the concerns of the limited workload. I'm not looking at the sims. I want to see what my instincts say, but my instincts are going to say Josh Jacobs. I don't know. I just don't know if Eli Mitchell is going to play. Let me pull up that practice report. This is such a good question. I don't know if you have to risk it with Eckler because the reports are just of a limited workload and they probably don't need to run him into the ground. So Eli Mitchell didn't practice Wednesday. I don't know. You're going to need to make a decision. I'm going to say Jacobs, Montgomery, and then I'm going to put this one on you. If you think Austin Eckler is going to play a full workload, play him. If you think that he's really going to be limited, I would go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire because Edwards-Helaire had 8 of 14 running back opportunities for the Chiefs in the first half before that game really got out of hand last week. I don't want to say just wait and play Eli Mitchell because I don't think he's going to play. But Jacobs, Montgomery, I'm good with. Eckler, it's just, you know what? The theme of the show has been stay tuned to the news. Keep tuned into the news. See if we get any more clarity on just how good that workload's going to be. And if Eckler is more than like 50%, I would play him over Clyde Edwards-Helaire because his CEH's ceiling is probably about 50% of the snaps. So I don't want to overreact too much to Austin Eckler. The projection's a little bit high for me from Number Fire, but I'll say Eckler, Jacobs, Montgomery as of now, unless we really find out that Eckler will be severely limited tonight. Sorry for the roundabout, but sometimes you got to think things through, for an extra second. Okay. Evan's asking, what about the CEH upside tonight? That's too grim, fan, but I'm gonna stick with CEH here. I'm gonna go to see what the Sims say for CEH. So he's projected for 11 points as a median. Not very likely to lead the slate in FanDuel points. But again, it's a dream matchup against a team that just invites you to run the ball against them. And yes, there was a 3-man split between CEH, Derek Gore, and Darrell Williams last week. But again, the first half workload, if you isolate that out, really did favor Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who did fumble on the goal line, was out for a bit, but came back in on the goal line or like on the 6 or whatever, which is where he thought it was like deja vu, kind of same play. But he was back out there. And his first half work again, 7 carries, 1 target, so 8 of 14 opportunities. He's got red zone work. He should be the primary back. So I think there is upside with Clyde Edwards-Helaire despite the limited snap rate. Okay. Question from Ralph on Facebook: Pittman or Penny in flex? That's a good one. I'll assume half PPR here. There's a lot of buzz around Rashad Penny, and I frankly loved Rashad Penny coming out of college. But I think I'm going to go with Michael Pittman here. I know I know that it's not the best defensive matchup, but Michael Pittman has a really strong role. And you would think that the Patriots will do what they can to limit Jonathan Taylor. And I think that will come at the expense of letting Michael Pittman be a little bit more freed up. Rashad Penny, I know, broke out with really great results last week, but his workload wasn't that phenomenal. I know Alex Collins is now on the COVID list. Adrian Peterson should play. Probably just take on that Alex Collins role. And it's never fair to do this, but if you take off like the huge touchdown run for him, it was a good day. It wasn't like an 85% snap rate day. So I think that the individual rushing matchup for him, a lower implied team total, taking Tyler Lockett off the field, probably making the offense worse. I'm going to go with Michael Pittman there between the two. Okay, another question about CEH. I think I talked about him enough. Austin on Twitch is asking, if James Conner doesn't play, who should I start at RB2? Michael Carter is supposed to play. That's what I've seen as well. Or do I pick up Eno to replace Conner if Edmonds doesn't return from IR? Okay. The Jets are also really depleted. But I think you should. So this is a tough one because I don't know who you'd have to drop to get that to get the insurance of having Benjamin on your team. That's a little bit tricky. But I don't think that Michael Carter is a bad enough play to go against just saying play Michael Carter, because when he was healthy, he was their guy. He got tons of targets. I know quarterback change probably doesn't help him get a bunch of targets, but I would say pick up Michael Carter and just go with Carter if we get word that Connor doesn't go. Grim fans asking thoughts on Donald Parham tonight. So let me check exactly what he did last week. The issue is they're getting Keenan Allen back, and that doesn't help him. It's going to hurt Jalen Guyton, Josh Palmer as well. Let's isolate this just to week 14. Donald Parham, just 8 routes, 2 targets. That's not enough for me, and the role should get worse with Keenan back. So personally, I'm not going to get there. I assume you're probably asking because the salary's low and he might make a 2-quarterback lineup work. I'm not against it because Donald Parham still can and does get red zone work. And if he scores, that might be enough. But really, and this is one thing I wanted to address, is like if you're trying to jam in both quarterbacks, you're betting against these guys here. You're betting against big games from them, because if they put up, 15 to 20 points, so let's say 2 of them, you're not going to have enough salary. You're not going to have enough FanDuel points from the guys like Donald Parham to overcome that gap. You're going to need multiple guys in this range with more affordable salaries than both quarterbacks. So it's going to depend on the way that you play things. I would not play Donald Parham without playing both quarterbacks. And there are going to be a lot of like those sort of tertiary, quaternary options down here. You might play like a Joshua Kelly and think that Eckler's not going to play a full workload. Kelly or Justin Jackson might get, although Jackson's salary is higher, 10,000, I think. Yeah, 10,000. Like that's kind of the trade-off you have to make. Parham by himself, I'm not interested in unless you're really playing the angle that Keenan and Mike Williams just get basically blanked tonight. Harrison Butker or Nick Folk. Love that. I typically always go with the favorite in this spot, and Butker is projected for an extra FanDuel point. Kickers, again, they're not bad plays on high-scoring slates. They're just a little bit worse than average, but they're also not better than average. And this just goes back to, like, it depends on the overall roster construction that you're going for. If you're saying that it's Herbert and Mahomes going back and forth, but they just spread the ball out, nobody really has a big game. You want both of those quarterbacks with the kicker who's just nailing extra points, maybe 2 field goals. That game script does exist, especially with teams that do spread things out. With Travis Kelce, I talked about the red zone and end zone equity issues. Tyreek Hill, he can get limited. The Chargers do their best to limit downfield passing. It's not the best week for Tyreek Hill to have a big game. Definitely wouldn't bet against it. But this is my favorite part about single game DFS is I can look at the sims and see what's most likely to happen. That's always going to point me to quarterbacks at MVP, almost always, aside from like last week, whenever it was very evenly split between, Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, other guys, along with those low upside quarterbacks. But you have to think things through with each lineup and just say, what's the path for this lineup actually to lead the slate and be the optimal lineup? If you can't sell yourself on that, try to make changes. But the kickers, I think, do fit with a double quarterback lineup, and you assume that you don't need to get back up to Tyreek or Kelce or Eckler in that lineup. Okay. With your question from DJ's asking, with your question from Grim Fan, would you still recommend starting Kelce? So in season long, absolutely. Tonight, yeah, I would still like Travis Kelce. I don't want to make it sound like I'm down on Travis Kelce. I usually am more up to date with my regression numbers. But Travis Kelce has, so this is what, 2, 4, 6, 8, like, he's got 1 touchdown in his past like 12 games, or 2 touchdowns, sorry, in his past 12 games. With the yardage even being down, that's still not really enough touchdowns for the yardage in this sample. Travis Kelce, though, historically does overperform in the touchdown column. So you could say, if you just look at his whole career, he's just sort of averaging out, but I don't think that's the case. The only drawback is like he's not getting red zone work to the degree that he usually is. But again, this is a much better matchup for him than it is for Tyreek Hill. So I think that Travis Kelce absolutely is in play. I would not play him at MVP very often just because even someone as good as Travis Kelce doesn't typically end up as the MVP in optimal lineups. Tight ends don't have generally as much yardage upside. The way that you sell yourself on Kelce as MVP is you say it's a lower scoring game and 100 yards and a touchdown is enough for him to lead the slate. If you think it's a full-on shootout, Kelce probably doesn't have enough to outscore the quarterbacks in that type of game. So that's kind of where I am with Kelce. I'm down on him, but not to the point where I'm going to recommend not playing him in single game or especially not benching him in season long. Shane's asking, can I play Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen in the same lineup in season long PPR? Yeah, absolutely, you can do that. You want to play the best plays you can in season long. Those are all great plays, especially if you don't have any better options with Eckler potentially being limited. Still a really good matchup for Eckler on the ground. I wouldn't bump off of any of those guys just because they're all in the same lineup. Mono's asking, Mike Davis, Craig Reynolds, Dearness Johnson, Gainwell, or Ty Johnson? I know, but here I am. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna say Mike Davis. He's playing a lot of snaps. He still has some red zone work. Loses a lot to Cordero Patterson, but of those, the best bet for snaps and some points going to be Mike Davis. Barrett's asking, what are your thoughts on Michael Carter in these upcoming weeks? again, Michael Carter was really featured in this Jets backfield when healthy. I think that'll be the case again. I don't know why they would just go away from him. The Jets don't have a whole lot really to play for, but it seems like they want to get him involved and see what he can do. And I think that he'll be featured again. It's just the issue with someone like Michael Carter is the offensive expectations will always be low. But I do think that he's worth picking up if he's available on your waiver wire. And I think that he'll be a good sort of high-end flex. I won't even call him a low-end RB2 because he gets passing work, and that matters even in standard scoring leagues. Okay. I see CEH here. This will be the final question for tonight. James Conner, CEH, Eckler, Eli Mitchell, AJ Dillon, Aaron Jones. Start 1, flex 2, running backs in PPR. So that's a little bit difficult with the uncertainty around Eckler and Mitchell and Conner. Aaron Jones did not practice today. So I got to pick 3 here. I will say the first 3. And if Conner doesn't play, then we pivot to potentially AJ Dillon because Aaron Jones might not play. So that'll do it for me. Great questions for tonight. Got to talk a lot about game theory for the single game slate, which I don't typically get to do a lot. It's my favorite part of doing these Q&As. But best of luck in your season-long leagues. I know it's tough. I know there's a lot of injury news to try to keep up with. Just stay tuned. Check out the player news section on NumberFire. And if you stay up to date, you will have an edge in season-long and in DFS. So best of luck for tonight. Big thank you to Joy Affleck for producing the video side of this show. Let's hit a big stack. You can follow me on Twitter, Gdula13. Check out everything I do on numberfire.com. But let's have a great game tonight and a better weekend in Week 15.